Okay, so this lesson here is a little bit odd, maybe in the fact that number one, it's sort of a dual purpose, l- like BAME lesson, partly on how BAME government works. Also, it addresses specifically the content that we're going over in class about what is the best possible situation for ensuring people the best access to the pursuit of happiness. So, what we're going to talk about today is what America is and what it is not, and why it is that way. So, we're going to cover two basic topics: the form of government that we have and how we elect the people who run us. So, the title of this little presentation here is A Republic, Not a Democracy. So, that's the first thing to understand. So, let's take a look real quickly back in history. Democracy comes from Greece, specifically from the city state of Athens. In Athens, citizens directly voted on all legal matters. It was actually their job. So if you were an Athenian and you were an Athenian citizen, which there were actually very, very, very strict qualifications to be a citizen of Athens, when it came time to vote, you literally they went through the streets with ropes and they dragged people into the voting areas where you would cast a vote of yes or no on whatever legal issue was being discussed. In fact, because your job was to be a citizen, as in the government, they literally paid you to vote. If you didn't show up to vote, not only did you not get paid, you were actually fined or perhaps even put in prison for doing so. In a democracy, it is strict majority rule. So if 6,000 people are voting, all it takes is 3,001 votes to get something across. Democracy will work on a local level, like for towns or counties, even big cities to some degree, and sometimes even on a state level. When you have a state referendum where people vote directly, it goes, that is directly a democratic process. So, just as a quick recap, democracy is a Greek concept. And to be very technical here, citizens voting, the the Athenians were really technically an oligarchy because of the restricted number of people who were actually citizens. It would be really impractical to do this on anything above a state level. And let's look at that briefly. So, the next thing, republicanism. The concept of a republic comes from Rome. This is a picture of the Roman Senate, which is where we get the name of our governing body. Article 4 guarantees a republican form of government to the United States as a whole and to the individual states. The way a republic works is people cast votes and elect representatives who will vote on their behalf. If you don't like the way the representative votes, you can vote him or her out in the next election. Democracy, you vote directly. Republicanism, your representative votes on your behalf. That's what the United States has. On a practical level, it would be nearly impossible to accurately and probably legitimately and safely count every single American's voting or vote in the event of a national election coming up. Now, here's the real question. You will hear that America is a democracy. We must protect our democracy. This is an attack on our very democracy. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. In fact, if you really go back and look at the intent of the founders were terrified of democracies. Alexander Hamilton, I would suggest if you have a chance, just stop and read these quotes directly and to let them sink in. I'm not going to ask you direct quotes on the test. The real issue is to understand that really none of our founding fathers wanted a democracy. Alexander Hamilton, we are forming a republican form of government. Real liberty is not in the extremes of democracy, but in moderate governments. If we incline too much to democracy, we shall soon shoot into a monarchy or some form of a dictatorship. His last letter, he said, quote, our real disease is democracy. Thomas Jefferson, the great champion of the individual, a democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people take away the rights of the other 49. Benjamin Franklin, democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. John Adams, remember, democracy never lasts long. It wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. James Madison, pure democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, and have never been compatible with personal security or the rights of property, and in general have been in their short lives as they have been violent in their deaths. The basic meaning of the founders: a republic protects individuals from the majority. Democracies are a form of tyranny, which is why when we talked about wacky Karl and his funny ideas, Karl Marx said that the first step to communism was to establish democracy. So keep that in mind. We are a republic and not a democracy. We were never intended to be a democracy. When people talk about American-style democracy, they're actually referring to a form of republican government, much closer to Rome than to Greece. Now, speaking of which, so we elect representatives. This is how our form of government works. That is also true of the president. The president is not elected by the people. This is kind of a misnomer. The president is actually elected by the states. In the Constitution, in Article 2, Section 1, it sets up something known as the Electoral College. The Electoral College is not a place, it's not a school, it's a process for electing. What we do when we cast our votes for president is we actually cast votes for the representatives who will vote on our behalf. Every state gets electoral votes. The electoral votes are determined by the number of representatives you have in the House of Representatives, minimum being one, plus one vote for each of your senators. That's two more, meaning every single state has a minimum of 3 votes. States themselves determine how the electoral votes are awarded. The states of Maine and Nebraska actually assign proportional electoral votes, which means that if one candidate got 51% of the vote, the other one got 49, the winning candidate would get the majority of electoral votes, with the losing candidate getting the minority. If one candidate got 3/4 of the vote, he would get 3/4 of the electoral votes, as opposed to the other 48 states, which do winner take all. Now, the reason why the Electoral College has become such a raging controversy is actually twofold. Here is a map of the 2016 election. Granted, this map is now 7 years old, but you'll get kind of the idea. If you look at this, there's a number of states that you really need to focus on. California at 55, Texas at 38, Florida, Pennsylvania, or Florida and New York at 29, Pennsylvania at 20, Ohio or Illinois at 20, Ohio at 18, Georgia at 16. All you need to win the Electoral College is one more than half the number of votes. There are 537 electoral votes, I believe. 538. So all you would need would be, I was told there'd be no math, by the way, 270 electoral votes to win. You would win 270 to 268 at that point. So realistically, if you just add it up, 55 and 38 is 93, plus 29 is 122, 142, 162, 191, 207. If you just win those states, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, those 7 states will give you 3/4 of the votes that you need to win. This is one reason why people are a little uncomfortable with it. It really focuses on the big states. So the main arguments against the Electoral College are that, number one, it puts too much focus on the big states. The big states really control the outcome of the election, leading candidates to ignore places like Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, because there's only a piddly number of votes there. Nobody really cares. Problem number two, it does not reflect the will of the people. Realistically, you could have 10 states decide the election for the entire United States, which means that 10 states elect the president, while the other 40 may have disagreed with that. These are arguments against the Electoral College. Now, arguments for the Electoral College. The Electoral College is designed to prevent people from making an uninformed choice. It was designed to prevent a very few big states from controlling the election and everything based on their populations. Now, why is there such a problem? The problem is twofold. Number one, because most states do not go with proportional voting and the winner take all system, if you win California by, let's go the extreme, if you win by just one vote, you get all 55 of California's electoral votes. That's problematic. But that's not the problem of the Electoral College. That was the choice of the state of California. Either side will complain about the big state voting when they don't win. Problem number two, the Electoral College was never designed to accommodate political parties. It was designed to accommodate multiple candidates running. So in situations where you would have, which we actually, just newsflash, we may in 2024 have 4 or 5 main candidates running, depending on how the parties fall out. The Electoral College was designed to be a place where the merits of the candidates would be weighed and the best possible selection would be made for president, not whatever party controlled things. The other thing to remember here is that electors are not free to vote for whom they wish. The parties choose the electors. You must vote for the candidate of the party that wins that election. So when we talk about, so like just for an example, if you're a Democrat and you didn't like Joe Biden, if Joe Biden won your state, you could not vote against him. You are obliged to vote for the person that the state and the party have told you to vote for. You have no personal control over this. This concept of faithless electors is not legitimately constitutional under the party system that we have. Okay, because the states decide those. We'll talk a bit about how this affects BAME because we do have an electoral college in BAME with each section getting electoral votes. But this is just a quick wrap of this is how America works. So just as a quick recap of everything, we are not a democracy. We are a republic. We elect representatives to vote on our behalf. We can choose to remove them in the next election cycle. Democracies only work on a state or local level. And our founders never intended for us to be a democracy. We were set up specifically to be a republic. Even the president is elected through a Republican process by us voting for electors who then cast votes on behalf of the states that they represent. Okay, that's it. That's how it works. That's how it rolls. And that's what's best for America. And it's given us peace, prosperity, and success for 200 plus years. Peace and love.